Welcome, everyone. This is the next session we're doing on why the intern model is broken. It's something that I'm rather passionate about, and we've got a fantastic panel for you to discuss this. The first one is Ronayne, Group Creative Director at Anomaly, I can't even fucking speak, Anomaly London. Katie Thomson-Greene, MD of Creative Mentor Network, who we're working together on the Foundation Futures Programme. Hannah Belill, sorry Hannah, Global Head of Think Rising and Music Videos. Debbie Ellison, Global Chief Digital Officer, VMLY&R, I got that, Commerce. Please welcome them to the stage. Woo.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
I'm sorry, Hannah, but where's Hannah?
Hi, gang. Come up, move up. The back seats too. Come fill up. These sofas are nice, aren't they? I feel a little bit like Philip Schofield. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, get settled. I mean, the first thing we want to do is just, obviously this is all about internships, how we improve the internship model and the experiences of these amazing people here. Can we just do a little hands up of who's in an internship or has done one before? Or anybody that's looking for one? Good, we're halvesies and halvesies. That's really great. Okay, cool. So what we wanted to do is have quite a frank conversation, I guess, about the state of, I guess, the stereotype of the internship model to start off with. So pass the mics along, but you guys, from each of your experiences, can you just tell us what you think the pure stereotype of an internship is from your perspective?
So I'll go first because I'm sitting next to you. I think from my experience starting out in the creative industries, my stereotype of an internship was essentially the sons and daughters of really senior clients who have said, you need to give my son or daughter work experience, a job within the industry. And also people that had graduated from university who came from a very comfortable financial background who could afford essentially to work for free. So for me, that had always been my experience of internships, the opportunity for internships coming into the industry. And it was a really stark wake-up call for me because I'd come from a technology and digital background where actually I didn't see that as much. And so a lot of what I've been doing has obviously been trying to change that in the senior role that I'm in now.
Yeah, I would agree definitely with what Debbie said. I think for me as well, so I did fashion at university, and I really wanted to go into the fashion industry. And when I was at university, a big part of getting into the industry was you had to do an internship, and a lot of the time you had to do a year-long internship that was unpaid, and it was, I'd say 99% in London. I'm from a kind of fairly small town, only about an hour and 10 minutes away from London, and I was actually offered an internship, which was at the time my dream job. It was at kind of a big fashion brand that I won't say the name of, and it was a year's internship unpaid, and I did it for probably about a month, and kind of slept on friends' sofas and slept at my sister's, and then I ended up having to leave and move back to my hometown to get a job in an office because I just couldn't afford to do it. So I think, I mean, we can obviously talk about this a little bit more, but I work with a charity that works with young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and I think for our community, internships are incredibly difficult if you're not paid, and that's kind of has always been my experience of internships. I know there is change, but yeah.
And Hannah, from a film point of view?
Well, yeah, just to echo what you both said, I think that it's a really polarizing conversation. Personally, I had a really amazing experience when I was a graduate. Part of my university degree was a paid placement, actually, a 12-month paid placement. And I got shipped off to London and I was on a salary. It was a London living wage salary, and I was able to exist comfortably and get some great industry experience. And it was, that's not the norm. And in saying that, it wasn't a creative role. It was a role within the Ministry of Defence. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll leave that with you. But I think from the perspective that I'm in right now, which is film production, I work a lot with young, developing director talent. And a big part of what is expected is to build a body of work. And a lot of the time that's from scratch, and a lot of the time that's with no budgets. And there is a huge culture of doing work, creative work for free in order to build a portfolio, to build a reel. And so it just, presents itself as a huge problem, because if you haven't got the means and the background to support that, then it just makes accessing industry, very, very challenging. So I think, that's kind of my stance on it at the moment, but we'll dive into it, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. So going from the sort of awful negatives and the stereotypes and the sort of doom and gloom of it, before we get into ways that we can solve this, or techniques that all of our companies are using, and specifically with you, Katie, and ways to improve, let's just talk about the dream of what we think internships should be, or what your thoughts might be around that. We can go down or up, or whichever way you want to go again.
Shall I kick off? So, I think that there needs to be a structure in place. They need to be formalized. Access to it needs to be formalized to avoid nepotism. I think that's a huge thing. And then the course needs to be structured so that there's some kind of measurable progress and development throughout the period of time that they're there. There needs to be a support structure and clear supervision as well, so that people aren't just sort of dished out menial tasks. Yeah, that's the top line thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, very loud. I think as well, the kind of the way to start is how you're recruiting your interns. So making sure that you're recruiting from a really diverse pool of talent, exactly like Debbie said, not just reaching out to, friends and sons and daughters of colleagues already in the business. So I think that's a big one. I completely agree with Hannah about having a structure, and I think it's really difficult. I speak to a lot of kind of small to medium agencies that are really busy, and they, someone who's trying to set up their internship scheme, this is not their job. They're also doing their full-time job. So I completely appreciate it's a really difficult thing. But I think if you don't put time into setting up a structure and you don't onboard somebody properly, you're not going to reap the benefits yourself as a business. And also, it can be really detrimental to the person in that role, because they might be coming in for the first time and experiencing this environment. And if they have, a terrible time, they're not going to enter the industry. They're not going to then go on to kind of thrive within the industry. So I think it's really, really important to have a structure in place. I also think, controversially maybe, the internship shouldn't be a year. I think kind of 3 months is enough. I think also what you can do, which is a really kind of great opportunity for the person in the role, is for them to move around different departments if you're a large enough organization, and for them to get experience with kind of working with different teams. Yeah, I could go on, but I'll hand over to Debbie.
Thank you, lovely. My perspective on this is that and the reason why I'm in the digital and technology industry is because I've seen such great progress around making our working landscape so much more equitable, right? And so one of the things that I feel quite passionate about is that actually if organizations, if creative agencies don't change the way in which they're supporting interns coming to the business, quite frankly, that young talent is going to go elsewhere or is going to set up their own business. I've seen it time and time again across my career, right? So that changes the power exchange between, the creative industry and next-gen talent, right? And so moving from an era where actually interns were there to like move mail about, do the printing, leave the latest in the office after all the seniors had gone home. What I love about where we are now is that is, in my experience, and I'd love to hear what everyone thinks in the audience, from my experience, like the next gen, and I've got 2 Gen Zers of my own, just don't. They don't succumb, they don't conform to that stereotype anymore. And so that's our problem, right? Because if we can't attract the next gen talent that can set up a website in 24 hours, that can, create content in half an hour, like that are so multifaceted and are so tapped into culture and relevancy of brands and creative today, we're the ones that are losing out now. And that's what I love about where we are today, is that I think the next gen talent understands that power, understands that value. And quite frankly, if we don't work towards making it a better work environment, a more supportive work environment, a more structured program and work environment to belong to, they'll just go somewhere else, or they'll create their own spaces and places where they can be creative and where they can be successful.
Yeah, and we'll be working for them, absolutely.
Yeah.
More power to it.
Pay us well, by the way,
Pay us well.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Cool internships. Katie, you mentioned about the pressures of like small to medium agencies, and I'm sure for larger agencies, I'm talking specifically in advertising now, but I'm sure this goes across all of the creative board in tech and in fashion and in film. It not being your day job to set up an internship program, right? And you've got a million other things on your plate. And it's not that, I don't think there's any company out there in the world that doesn't want to be more diverse, that doesn't want to have this fantastic, influx of new talents. But there are barriers in the way, and I would see that as being time and money-based and investments. So within that, I think the other big thing with that being the main problem is the bigger question of like traditional education and people, let's say, who've gone to university or maybe who have not, and all of the socioeconomic problems that come into that. Again, from your guys' experience, and maybe we start with you, Katie, like what do you think is the best way for companies to arm themselves up and to be ready to help educate raw talent coming in?
Well, you could work with Creative Mentor Network.
Oh, well, what a segue.
No, you can, but not just that. I think it's just putting the work in, which obviously is difficult to give up the time. I think it's reaching out to charities like ourselves, but there's so many different organizations that work with diverse talent. We specifically focus on socioeconomic diversity. I think that's, a big thing is about kind of diversifying where you reach out to your talent. I think also, so as part of working with Creative Mentor Network, we do a lot of outreach. So we go into schools, colleges, universities, youth centres, work with local authorities. And really the kind of start of it is getting young people to understand the labour market and to understand the different roles within the creative industry. So I could talk about this forever, but the curriculum in this country at the moment isn't particularly creative, and it's not particularly strong from a careers kind of advice perspective. So a lot of young people, especially from a lower socioeconomic background, will often just not even consider the creative industry because they won't know anybody that works in it. They don't know how to get into the industry. They don't know about the roles. They might know about a film director or an actor, but they wouldn't know that you can be, there's thousands of different jobs within the film and TV industry. So part of what we do is kind of break down those barriers. So if you don't have the means to work with an organisation or charity, reach out to local schools, reach out to other organisations to try and tap into that diverse talent. I think also it's just recognising that young people, I'm only speaking from a young person perspective, so we work with 16 to 25-year-olds. They may not have had the same experience as other young people. So thinking when you're interviewing for an internship, how can you make that really accessible? How can you break down those barriers straight from the kind of word go? So whether that's changing how people apply, you know, they could do a video application, or they can have a chat with you on Zoom before and ask some questions. I think that's a really important kind of thing to do, because you're not giving people kind of extra help, you're just supporting them to understand the role, understand the industry, because they may never have met anybody in the industry. So even to just apply for an internship in the creative industry is quite a scary thing for some of the young people that we work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hannah, like from a film, I mean, obviously it's, you know, internships are very different for your core skills. Within your program, how do you go about recruiting?
Well, I mean, I was having a think about this before, and, you know, there's like the office-based programs, and then there's, what's more relevant for me really is set-based programs. So it's much more project by project. And what we've been doing over the last 2 years is on-set, entry-level trainee placements. So we're inviting students from LSA, London Screen Academy, and, you know, we have so many emails every week from people wanting to access industry, so we use that as a resource as well. But we invite people to come and join on set, and we offer them, you know, which department they'd like to shadow in, being, you know, production or camera or lighting or costume. Give them that kind of choice. And then, you know, the feedback that we've been having is amazing. They get to have really meaningful contact with, you know, commercial level crew in that department, and they come away with a springboard for a network, and that gives them access to opportunities moving forward. And people have come back and said, you know what, that was really great, but I'd love to try X department. And so we've placed them again. And then other times people have been so impressive, we've hired them as a former member of the crew on the next project. So it's really, it's measurable, it feels really contained. These placements are only kind of 1, 2, 3 days, but the amount of growth you see someone make in that time is incredible. And I had another point to make as well. It's escaped me. The other point, the important point, is that we pay people.
Right.
So we pay people London living wage for their time, because it's really, you know, you can't assume that people can afford to take a day off work to broaden their experience in a different industry. And making that accessible and making sure that we're getting people that, you know, haven't come from a specific background is, you know, super important to us. So that's one thing that has been working really well. In terms of more like longer form office-based placements, the points I mentioned before, like formal structure, support, budget to support that, we just haven't got that in place. HR and senior leadership are like looking into building that into the budget for next year, so that can be a more intentional program. But at the moment, we're just doing project by project placements, which is working well.
And that's fantastic. I mean, I think what you say about having that structure and an investment in is so important for all of us, no matter what our disciplines are. And Debbie, I guess coming from a, yeah, girl, she's ready. Like, I was just going to say, coming from a tech point of view, that's obviously understands the value probably a little sooner than, let's say, the rest of us. But yeah, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that the ladies have made, one of which is, one of the things that really gets my go is seeing agencies or creative businesses use internship as a way to tick the diversity box, right? So, you know, diversity inclusion isn't just about having young, diverse talent. And whilst it's super important to make sure that we have accessible routes into the creative industry, I mean, for instance, you know, Katie mentioned reaching out to younger and younger talent pipelines, which we do. So I set up the incubator, which is our 16 to 18-year-old work experience in London and New York, where young people get to work on real live client briefs, but actually, and I think more importantly, they get to spend time with our most senior leaders within our organization. So our CEO, myself, our CCO, our heads of capability. So they're right there at the top. And this is what I mean about the value exchange. But unless you are driving diversity and inclusion more structurally within the organization, all that's going to happen is that you're going to prove to that next cohort of talent that this isn't a space and place that they belong to, and that should be on their career pathway, right? So I would just, and we'll probably get to it, but you need to make sure that any internship program or initiative is actually coupled with kind of business transformation as well, right? And so we've been lucky enough, and we've been leading kind of our own kind of D&I transformation within the organization to make sure that actually when that amazing talent comes into the business, they can see people like them. They can see people that haven't been to university and are still in the C-suite. They can see people that have come, you know, like me, from a low socioeconomic background and see that we've been successful. That, for me, is super important, right? Otherwise, what will happen is you'll just have this amazing, you know, group of talent who get to spend some time with you,
and then go on to start their own thing.
Yeah, and then they don't come back.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just such an important note for, like, at all stages, I think, coming from education as well, like, to really, to prove on the equity, I guess, through an entire career path, rather than you're here for us to take some photographs and, you know.
And Hannah mentioned it as well, right? Like, the other great thing about internships is, you know, the creative industry has so many different roles and facets to it, right? So you don't necessarily just need to be an artist or a creative. You can work in, you know, the commercial teams and the finance teams, or you can work in the people team. There's so many opportunities, amazing opportunities within our industries, that actually internships can be an amazing way to showcase that to talent, and to have creative talent find themselves in different spaces that work for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, getting to shadow everyone from costume through to camera, and that way it's the same thing through strategy and creative and all sorts of facets of it as well.
Can I just, I think it's also, I think that's a really good point, Debbie. I think it's about, as a business, also thinking, why are we doing this? Because if you are doing it because you want somebody junior to come into the office and, you know, pack things up, or, you know, when I did an internship, it was a long time ago, and it was just, you know, packing things and stamping envelopes and things like that. Yeah, making tea. And I know things are changing, but I think it's really thinking, why are we doing this? Because once you've got that, you can then start the structure of the rest of the internship. And I think it's also really important to get everybody on board. I think it comes back to, again, what Debbie was saying about how if you're not an inclusive environment or an inclusive business to work in, once you're kind of through the door, you're not going to stick around. Like, the young people that we work with are incredible, and they're so talented. And we have showcases where I go to and I'm just completely blown away by their talent. They're not going to stick around in businesses that aren't the places that they don't want to work in. Like, they're demanding more from businesses. And I think if you need to get your whole team on board with that, because a lot of what we see is there'll be one person or there'll be a small group of people that are really trying to improve things, and then they may say, we're getting a bit of pushback because, you know, we all had to do it, or that's how we got into the industry. Right. And it's just, it's not really good enough anymore. It's not the way that it should be. So I think it's also just really thinking, like, everybody has to be bought into the change. It can't be that there's one person kind of fighting to make a difference. It has to be across the whole business.
And I think that's the reason why I set up the incubator. It wasn't just to give, you know, next-gen talent, you know, visibility into our amazing industry, but it's actually also to show our own people what next-gen talent really looks like, and the skills, the multidisciplinary talent that they have, and how valuable that is to our own business. And that's what I mean about the value exchange. We're now not in, thankfully, the position that Katie's talking about, which is, you know, you're working, you know, 20-hour days, and you've got to be the first person in and the last person out. Like, as I said, like, I love the fact that next-gen talent don't subscribe to that anymore, and actually they do know their worth, and they do know that actually they bring to the table so much talent that actually we would miss out if we don't capitalize on that.
Exactly. I love this. Like, I'm heading up this thing called Stink Rising, and that's the entire philosophy of what I'm doing at Stink, what we're doing at Stink. It's accessing brand new raw talent that's coming from all avenues. Most of the time they haven't come from an educational background. They haven't got any kind of traditional or formal film training at all. So it's exposing raw talent to a really senior group of established filmmakers and execs, and exposing them to a really established global network. And it's commercially viable. It makes commercial sense. It's like I'm actively building the talent pipeline for in 2 or 3 years' time. It's like totally in our interest to be doing this, and it's competitive. We want to give people the best experience. We want to show them the most exciting and dynamic parts of the industry. It's in our interest to do that for people, and there's immense value there.
100%. I mean, I guess just picking up on what we're talking about, this old school thing of, oh, well, I had to walk through 4 hours of snow to get to my unpinned, you know what I mean? It's like, that was 20 years ago, or in my case, that was slightly less than 20 years ago, but a while ago. I got paid in bus fare and sandwiches, and I had to do that internship when I was still in term time, so I could afford yada, yada, yada. But for me to then put that onto a young creative person now in cost of living crisis, education costing so much, like all of the other stuff that they have going on is completely the wrong attitude. And the reason I bring that up is because the industry has changed so much, right? Like incubators were somewhere as important as Stink within the wider film company, and you guys know that that's like such a valuable thing. You guys know that that's like where your next gen of like new type of thinkings that can input into that, especially given the new technologies that we have, the new ways of working. Katie, I mean, it's gone are the days where somebody's going to get to be in an office face-to-face with senior talent 5 days a week. What do we do about that? Like, do you have any thoughts in and around current models?
Yeah, I think it is a really tricky thing to navigate, and I think what Hannah was saying about the placements where people go on for a couple of days and they're on set. So the way we work is we partner with businesses and we facilitate mentoring programs. And one of the programs that we run, so we actually run a program as part of the UK Creative Festival. We have a showcase tomorrow if anyone wants to come. Little plug. We also run a program with the APA, the Advertising Producers Association. And as part of that, they do it really well in that there's a mix of our young people go on set with a lot of their mentors, but then they also have a catch-up on the phone, or they might meet on Zoom. I think it's getting that mix. So something for us is we really want our mentees to go into their mentor's place of work, because depending on where they are in their career, they may never have been into an office like that before. They may never have sat in a team meeting or been part of a pitch or different kind of, we want to put them in as many different situations that they can shadow as possible. Obviously, before COVID, this was very much in person. All our training was delivered in person. This has now moved to a kind of hybrid model, but it actually is working really well, because we've seen our mentees and our mentors actually speak much more than before COVID, because they're able to jump on Zoom or a call instead of having to go into their office or meet in person. So I think doing a mix of it is really important. I think it is really important that junior talent is in the office. I think if you are completely kind of working from home, and I know there are organizations that have switched that model, you have to put things in place to support that talent. I think of my first few jobs, and the way that I developed was just kind of standing in the kitchen, listening to people and introducing myself, or like just kind of probably being quite gobby and going and chatting to people. But it got me to chat to much more senior people, and that then, you know, led to me getting promoted or being in a room which maybe I wouldn't have been considered for if I hadn't have been. So I think it is also about thinking, is there someone as well in that business that can mentor junior talent? You know, can you do a mentoring system or a buddy system, not just a line manager, having someone else that is pulling them into things that might not be just part of their day-to-day job because they might be more focused on kind of more junior elements of the business. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Amazing. And Debbie, from your point of view, and specifically with the incubator, how are you guys finding it?
I agree with Katie. I think one of the, excuse me for saying this, one of the brilliant things that has come out of the pandemic is it has actually moved some managers into becoming leaders and really thinking more holistically about the well-being and the intentional career progression of, you know, the people that they're responsible for. And I think that absolutely extends into kind of internships and younger talent. So for me, actually what I see in my career is the younger talent do want to come in. They're actually, you know, biting at the bit to spend time in the office, getting to shadow senior leaders, understand how they talk, how they, you know, deal with certain situations. And I think we as managers, we as leaders have a responsibility to kind of meet them in those spaces, to give them that experience. It's really difficult sitting behind a screen, being stumped about who to connect to, who to network with. You don't have those corridor conversations. You don't overhear conversations that are going to be really important to whatever you're working on. And so I do think that there has been an opportunity also for mid-level managers and for leaders to be much more holistic, and that's applying now, I think, into internships. The other thing also is, you know, having someone green coming to the business, it takes a lot of time, and Hannah and I were talking about this earlier, right? It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of nurturing, and I think somewhere along the way, I think many organizations have lost the ability to do that, have lost the ability and actually have reduced capacity to develop that talent. And I would just say, don't be irresponsible and take on junior talent unless you can commit to their well-being, their career progression, and moving them forward. I think it's a massive watch out, especially as there's such a war for talent at the moment.
Right. I mean, I guess it's such a precious thing, our junior talent, and how we look after people. And the second the going gets tough, COVID, and, you know, all of the things that all of our companies went through, maybe people drop the ball a little bit.
But it's also your reputation. I read something I think really interesting a couple of weeks ago, which is junior talent would rather take a 25% cut in salary to work for a more purposeful organization. You know, an organization that cares about its people, an organization that kind of gives back into community, an organization that is much more responsible beyond kind of the transactional element of the work that we do. And so, again, like, you have to think about the whole, like, employee experience of internships as they come into your business, into the industry, and we've all got a responsibility for that.
And there's such a butterfly effect. I mean, I'm lucky to work in an organization that really looks after its people, but the butterfly effect that you feel through that and through the work, through our partners, through the whole thing, it's an invaluable point. Okay, we're gonna open up for some questions in a little bit, so do have a think if there's anything you want to ask for us. But I just want to wrap up our little. It's the 10-minute sign. 10-minute sign. We'll be looking out for it. One little thing that I want to finish up with your wonderful brains is, aside from, so we've spoken about the circumstances of the world as it is, we've spoken about the industry at large, about education, informalities or not, as it were. What are the, aside from skill sets, what are the soft skills that you would look for in interns, like personality traits? I'm just interested to know what you think. Maybe, Hannah, do you want to tell us about how you...
So, this is interesting, and I think there's not one answer. I think talent comes in all shapes and sizes, and I think everyone's got something to offer, honestly, and there's so many nooks and crannies in this industry for one to find themselves in. It's really about, I think, finding the right fit for that person, because everyone's got something to offer. In terms of specifically what I'm focusing on at the moment, which is director talent, I think it's, you know, original thought, enthusiasm, open-mindedness, a hunger, and a sense of humour goes a long way.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're a very small team, so we don't have interns in our team. But I think something to think about as well that we talk a lot about in our training is culture fit versus culture add. And it kind of goes back a lot to what Debbie was saying before about how when you are interviewing somebody, we've all been there, we've met someone, they've sat down, we've been like, they're great, I could go to the pub with them on a Friday, they'll get the job done. They can just come in, I won't have to onboard them, I've got so much to do, I'm going to hire them. But actually, that isn't the best thing for the business, because what you do is you then look around and you just have the same people in your team. And I think especially coming from a creative business, you need to have other voices on your team. So we talk a lot about kind of culture fit versus culture add. Yes, this person might not be able to kind of hit the ground running. They might not be the person that comes to the pub on a Friday. That's not a problem. What are they going to add to your team? What are they going to bring to your team that's different? Of course, they need to have the qualities that Hannah's talking about. They need to be committed. They need to be dedicated. But they don't need to be like everyone else. Actually, they should be different. And that is a really important thing, I think, to come back to. So whenever I interview someone now, I always, after an interview, think, are they culture fit or are they culture add? And I then kind of ask myself, okay, why am I feeling like that? Why am I being drawn to this person? And it's a really helpful way to then kind of make sure you're not just hiring people because A, it's going to be helpful for you because they don't need a lot of training. And obviously, I'm not saying that you're going to hire someone that can't do the job, but it might be that they just need that extra bit of onboarding. And what are they going to bring to the business in the future? So not really the answer to your question, LA, but just to think about that when you're hiring interns.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my perspective on this, I've got kind of two perspectives, one of which is, like Hannah, especially in the digital and technology space, nothing stands still, right? So you're never going to know about everything at any time. So I'm always looking for somebody who's just naturally curious, who, doesn't worry about not knowing the answer, that can kind of go out and have a form a perspective and an opinion and go out and research all of the things that you'd expect, right? And obviously passion and enthusiasm and all of that great stuff. But actually more selfishly, I think, what is the value that I could give to them, right? Not what is the value that they can give to me, but actually, is there something in this person that I can work with or that we can work with that is going to propel them into great heights? And I say that selfishly because that's the thing that gives me the dopamine hit, right? Like we were talking about this earlier. It's like there's nothing I love more than taking in, new talent, green talent, and seeing them be next-gen leaders or seeing them in, in other agencies and other places and spaces, and they refer back to their time with us and with me. That's the selfish answer, is like, what can I do for you?
I love it. Oh God, I want to come work for you. Okay, thank you so much, you guys. Any questions from our pals? That gentleman here, hello.
Thanks very much. Yeah, this has been fascinating to listen to, people who are actually doing stuff around this. But one of the things that I find really intimidating about this is just the scale of how many, kids there are out there, right? There are about, I just Googled it, there are about 3,500 schools, secondary schools in the UK, that's in England actually, right? And so when we're talking about this outreach thing, right, I just want to go into schools and, like, I'm from Little Black Book, so I want to get a Little Black Book campaign story up on the screen and say, look at that list of credits, here are all the things you can be doing. Would you like to know what they are? But to do that in 3,500 schools, plus the ones that are in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, is a huge task. So how do we scale that outreach? And how, with the education system failing in the ways that it is, how do we as a comms industry communicate in this mass way that we need to?
Do you want me to take this one? It is really difficult, and I do sound a little bit like a broken record, but you can work with organisations like Creative Mentor Network. So we have an outreach side of the charity, and that is a huge part of what we do. We go in and we speak with young people. If you're a mentor on our programme, so what we do is we facilitate mentoring programmes, but we also train mentors. So we train them on how to be good mentors and coaches, but also how to kind of recognise the barriers that a lot of young people face so that they can go into their own businesses and make change. But you can also be a mentor ambassador. So that would be you kind of actively going into a school. We organise all of that. The main thing that our young people need to know about is they just need to know about the labour market, like I said. They also need to know about networks. So we know that the creative industry heavily relies on network. It's very, the recruitment is very driven by networks. And so our young people, they don't have large networks in the industry, so we ask our mentors to introduce them to as many different professional connections as they can. And then also employability skills, so things like just confidence. How do you write an email? What do you wear on your first day of work to the office? You're probably not going to turn up in a suit. If everyone wears trainers, does that mean you can wear a tracksuit? All these things that are really confusing if you've never worked in the industry. So you can do that. You can also just start small and reach out to local schools around where you live, your place of work. Schools are always really keen to hear from people, especially people from the creative industry. Teachers have such hard jobs and they often don't know a lot about the creative industry. So if you're offering to come in and speak to an assembly of 100 young people and talk about, I don't know, being a location scout or being a producer, they would love that. So I really do encourage you to reach out to individual schools. And it sounds really cheesy, but if you can stand up in front of that assembly of young people and talk to them about a job that they've never even heard of, someone in that room might be like, oh, I might consider that. I'm really good at that. And I think that actually, instead of me going to university and doing something, I'm going to explore doing this. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, amazing.
I would just say there are other opportunities. I mean, everything that Katie does is absolutely amazing. There's a platform called Investing in Futures that I encourage all of our UK employees to sign up to. Again, it connects you with local schools, so you can set a radius of your home or your office or both and just volunteer to go and talk into schools, and I've been doing that for a number of years now. There is a platform that my son introduced me to called Uptree, so if anyone in the audience has got kind of any internship opportunities or any kind of junior opportunities, again, advertise on that platform, because what I love about it is it's an unbiased application form. They don't take any of the personal identifiable information into the application form, so applications are judged fairly, which I think is, and in an unbiased way, which is hugely important. And I think maybe for some of the bigger organisations like ourselves, we have now got formalised partnerships with the likes of the Brixton Finishing School, University of East London, the School of Communication Arts, etc. And we've worked really, really hard to make sure that we attend those portfolio days, that we're going to speak to those students, and those students get first dibs into kind of any opportunities that we have across our network. So I think there's loads of things that individuals, any size organisation can do to really drive transformation for our industry.
Fantastic question. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're out of time, but if anybody wants to speak to any of us individually, we'll be loitering there just after. Hannah, Katie, Debbie, thank you so much. Brilliant. That was very inspiring. And thank you guys for coming.
And thank you to you.